Dear President, former President slash Chief Obama, and current President Chief slash Chief Obama, and all former President Chief and Americans, President Obama asked an important question, but no one allows the answers proper because everyone is and has been using values and value. It's a tactical ulterior from how nature uses it when nature is not criminal insidiousness, collusion slash S. As we observed since we were little kids with black people's whites of eyes not left out of the subjects of American of world history. That was entrenched before America's founders were born, and all were forced roles, and that had been sustained. And what that caused and keeps was this maintained consciously per a method, blamed on other things, others ourselves, as methods, plural, and forcing others to do that as styles of it too, as natures, as criminal insidious natures of positive treatments and negative treatments, as collusions to get over on us. So when you guys bring up equality, A through Z, the Republicans and Democrats, you guys have failed equality. The suburbs were designed tactically denatured before America's founders were born. For a syntax, they were used remotely with the database identities of relativity to us with this breaching method. Again, as identities of relativities, plural, tied by that. And what it caused, negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, blamed on other things, others ourselves, to keep the identity of relativity to ourselves, of the scientific value, of the human fact should be nature breaching method, for example, replaced right from the communications of James Madison, of our founders behind him and his plan. Fox Connecticut News increasingly has roles of people at Whiting Forensics involved with state police families interstates and with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with various natures of federal criminals, involved with predicate acts of facts into databases at campuses and acting tied to it. They've been faking and changing what's actually recorded with police phones, both fake transcripts, fake ties to kids. The intelligence community has roles with psychiatry, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, putting fake transcripts in databases. In other words, clearer than day. Or you guys can't afford to have mandated law followed because you guys have and have had help. Both President Obama and President Trump had fake transcripts and or the use of that, collusions over that, illusions with that, delusions with that, shown to them, appreciated by them with their communications with the agencies. Because it's only capable of being how you guys make subject treatments, value treatments. Nature shows us. In other words, how we know that everybody knows an extent. I've been speaking about this in my videos. But in other words, equality. How can we have equality when we have black people's whites of eyes separated from the subject so critical? How could we have had anyone who tries to debate that there's relativity, all kinds of identities of relativity to the not just the breaching of it, to replace from the our founders' communications and their uses of James Madison's plan, replaced. Then the nature of debate gets away with measuring and maintaining self-valued roles. Otherwise, that body is sensed, including if that body is a majority of people, including if it's everyone from a whole state or country. And that is adapted to, just the same way it was since before colonies and right through colonies. Our founders communicated for us, to demonstrate for us, but also communicate for us to understand there was a breaching method involved and they did not have free speech. They had to force how no one had free speech, used by themselves with James Madison's plan at key locations within. There were more than 13 colonies, but they had to force at key figures at key locations to break the syntactic rules of what was called by people either commonly as psychopaths or with passions and emotions as psychopaths, rule of law. See, and nature shows us 5 identities of order. Or it shows us, in other words, it shows us 3 identities of a group. The extent of time past, we know. Active, now grouped. And like we are shown the season's value. Value/values. The ones that aren't even here before they get here. But we are now observing everything and appreciating everything through systems abridged from how nature uses all our words in differences, therefore names. See, we are a human species body of individual bodies with all group differences demonstrated to us by a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible. It is why and how both our species, all these different species didn't invent how we have quality aspects in nature. Like fish have 2 eyes. They didn't invent, humanity didn't invent how we have 2 eyes. All exceptions, exception nature come with demonstration /S of the same thing. /S, the same identity that has its identity in relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that to us and to everything is the same body that has us discerning the part, appreciating, even if we're not using them in a sentence, the participle natures, how they are grouped and how they are coupled, and how they're part of the individual body of grammar /S. What all grammars describe is simultaneously too great and too finite to fit into temporary /lasting space nature, except for one way. And we're in how we are a quality of diffusion. At the same time, where our identity /identities are already relative to positive and negative simultaneously, equally. But we are a quality of diffusion. But now we are increasingly, having been since semi-ancient times, forbid free speech necessary to appreciate that. Offensively, there have been identity theft, fraud, slanders against me at each of being into databases with criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality aspects of nature's identities of names, only allowed to be speaking for themselves, for such. Otherwise, that body was incensed, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it's everyone, and that is adapted to, including it if it's any grouping of countries, while as locations, areas, and states, suits and ties, counters, exceptions, still has collusions with all these words. In other words, the identity of all spaceless existence is equal to, it shows us this to an extent, it is equal to all parts of space nature, equal to, it is a relativity to positive and negative equally. But then further, where Earth has a special difference, you know, where and how we are being shown, we are further a quality of diffusion that comes into here where the value of the past. To an extent, we know the past. That's gone. We know it was true always. To an extent now, we know truth /truths, active, grouped. And we know that, like the seasons. We can discern its identity of relationship to itself and its identities. Hypersingular. And the only increasing value of that at the same time equally. And see, but we have a means, even if a country A through Z agree to stay, let alone to stay while being used remotely while self-bodied rules and pretending other, to say systems tactical ulterior from the system that is hyper-native A through Z, human species body of individual bodies, all group differences. Now through systems tactical ulterior from its own that uses group differences to show us what is true always, also positive onto itself, or it is forced away from Earth, away from here, as Earth and as our own special difference, as forced space nature transfer, as a negative identity relationship to itself, already equal relativity to positive and negative. But where and how, the way we know. We're all like a quality diffusion further. In other words, this is what life is, a quality diffusion. In other words, all exceptions, exception nature, come with demonstration / S of this, too, of same thing, and of how it is using exceptions and exception nature the ways we know, but then further, and as means so that we could discern how exceptions and exception nature are being planted and valued fake. People are just saying or doing whatever online at locations to keep things going before courts that never had that never had anything but collusion / S self-value. Otherwise, that was adapted to. That was sensed and adapted to it, even if it was everyone. On and off the state of Connecticut corrections offices, on and off the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices, in Wethersfield, Connecticut, are increasingly people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, all along conjunctions to it and different natures of conjunctions to it, like all along Route 3, which goes by the state judicial branch offices. It's involved with conjunctions to it, like where it runs into Hangdog Lane and where Hangdog Lane runs into Two Rod Highway before the Berlin Turnpike, before the heart of Hartford. It's involved with people involved with multiple courts, family members, and then they have social group. They have social intimate ties to each other, and they have rules with where the branches of government are individually grouped together. One organized crime group at countries A through Z, relative to such serious subjects. Again, in other words, there's no the nature of debate regarding these serious subjects, let alone how we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and that is inseparable from the breaching method. Also inseparable from the subjects of American history, like slavery, inseparable from the subject of witch trials, like the subject of witch trials, inseparable from slavery as a subject, even if it was made up. One of the reasons we should have known this is because of how Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, next to the witch trials place in Old Wethersfield, Connecticut, George Washington had to come to counter there in Hartford, Connecticut, right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, using James Madison's plan. He had to counter key figures and make them to break the fact-sheeping nature laws that were collusion / S we know with sick things. See, the reason we don't know this is because all proofs of that have been, all the truths of that have been used for lies, and to screen lies, and screen motivations, even when there are real ones. This breaching method, in other words, made and maintained self-value, but nobody wants to have self-value. But then they go take jobs, for example, including the interbranch, and they take cases before them. And they leave out how they could, and they do have recorded collusion / S with all natures of crime scenes, the names at the interbranch locations, lawyers tied to them. There's a Trantolo and Trantolo. I barely ever had communications with them. They're involved with all kinds of law and order, and evidence is racketeering and digital crime methods and wire crime acts and methods that the FBI has roles with, Connecticut police departments and personal houses, personally and professionally involved with them. Like with Wethersfield Police, attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and then as an adult. Please, President Obama, President Xi, and President Trump, get WFSB, get me off the fake conversations with them. They also have some black KKK Confederate flag theme next to them, and next to as the same ones next to Fox Connecticut News, and collusion / S a bunch of ways, wire crime acts and methods self-value while being used remotely, pretending not to realize, and using how that's not self-valued simultaneously too, because it's self-valued because the breaching method is and has been using remotely the syntax, in the instances treatments of names A through Z, formally. And the lawyers too. Trantola has all kinds of organized crimes, acts, and roles. I barely ever had communications with them. With news involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, planting evidences, predicate acts with facts, needs and natures and styles are involved with as names that took jobs where they have to speak about crimes, but they can't afford to have discerned what's actually recorded as their predicate acts with facts roles. There are more people involved with child abusers, leaders of kids, first force years apart. That had roles then and now with them. There were time use /S of those ones years apart too. Involved with other natures of organized crimes at the same time with the campuses. A principal upskirt nature has a bunch of ties to security with the schools and medical with the schools and religious, the religions of the intelligence. There are people with the name Riley who have some Jewish theme and collusion /S with other nutbags with other religions too. And where they bring in other words, she repeated, they repeat things, confessions in the form of statements too. This breaching method used confessions and tells remotely in databases, identities of relativity to ourselves individually grouped and together. As colonies and then as states still, that's why they had the left. Our founders communicated for us to understand why and how they had to leave slavery entrenched. Our founders left us to communicate to understand where and how James Madison's plan forced the Civil War. In other words, force could only do damage control to where and how the North and South will still and do speak about that. They still don't have possession. They want to have a nature debate that can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract, afford not to change fate of people's short words with convictions proper by that. Again, by how James Madison's plan forced the Civil War. James Madison did not have free speech even as a president. Once he became president, he still didn't have free speech. George Washington agreed to help them and to use his plan. But we are not being allowed honesty regarding the extortion of George Washington. The nature debate contains people's self-valued roles with those principle understanding things. Okay, well, they're using knowledge of good and evil to get over on what is actually principle. We don't even have to know what appomattox is to know better than the experts on history. All we have to know is, this is more important. Why and how our founders didn't have free speech. And that includes Native Americans. President / Chief shows us this. And we were directed to refer to our founders, plural, as James Madison, singular. That also shows this. And then they went and got George Washington. Another way counter-extorted. But he agreed to help them and to use that plan. But we're supposed to be honest about his extortion. Even if even if it was his plan, they weren't counter-extorting him. It would have brought this up, James Madison's plan. And how and why we're supposed to refer to him singular as our leader. So there is the order of the finite. There are the order of group differences. There is a value. There's the order of the value of a sequence true. See, the same people about speaking about law and order. There's a recent Fox Connecticut News. All the Fox Connecticut News stories have a bunch of different ties to the people involved with the faith conversations with me that WFSB pretended also as World Trade Center predicate acts after the World Trade Center, but that simultaneously recorded and confessed and demonstrated and is communicating them involved with people with the name Scalora, interstates and intercities, and involved with a bunch of people with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with predicate acts with facts into databases. Also on Facebook, Facebook has organized crime acts and roles, personally and professionally, the difference of their guilt, the FBI, or the courts, New Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, have predicate acts with the FBI and with Facebook before that were after the World Trade Center attack has their collusion/S with the names with before it too. Increasingly, people from Wethersfield, judicial branch offices and corrections offices have roles with identity thefts, frauds, and slanders, and with the news at the same time, and with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, identities from the court, the names of the titles with the court, like judges, prosecutors, their family members, victims, advocates, roles with predicate acts with facts into databases that are building upon the ones in other. And these are also collusion/S with the difference of the guilt there, or the guilt with the names next to the campuses, increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders against strangers trying to act fake exceptions. All natures of investigators, where are used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions wrought since before our founders were born. They've been putting all kinds of courts have roles with a Dr. Shub of modern languages, involved with conjunctions to Two Rod Highway, involved with various courts, multiple probate court judges, family members, involved with their family members with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, in the various police departments with them, who had timed and have timed collusions with federal evidences, crimes on my street with people from other areas. When I was a kid and I was an adult, people from other areas timed to the same house/S, involved with wire crimes of the Wethersfield police, that attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and then as an adult. So it's important how nature uses order tactically ulterior than how the people, just because they're lawyers. In other words, you guys leave out and change your fake exception nature, because campuses A through Z are sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions wrought, just like originally when that was only allowed to be, and rolls with it. Self-value too. Otherwise, that body was sensed. So we don't have free speech. Offensively, this is and has been prevented. Sandy Hook campuses, including a fire department there, has rules with all kinds of natures of with their patients and criminals at their crime scenes and with names next to them before they were caught, and with the courts. The Britain Superior Court has roles with them. Also, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. These are increasingly people involved with the subject treatments. There are subject treatments that clear a day. We wouldn't still be speaking about values if free speech had be, like law and order. That's not order. These are increasingly people with the name Cololo and DeMoro, through administrations involved with the FBI and CIA, per the syntax of the people in the state police families, on off the state corrections offices in Wethersfield/Hartford, on off the state judicial branch offices, near the border with Glastonbury, as the river there too. These are people increasingly, like Wethersfield Pizza House is right near the state judicial branch offices, and Route 3 on the South State Highway there. There's a Stephen Stocco involved with Wethersfield Police and wire crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders with a Stephen Stocco. I never had a conversation with Stephen Stocco. I had one word in life. I said, "Is Maria there?" And then he hung up and called the police, and then the police called me. I never saw a Maria Fazzino on the campus of Wethersfield, Connecticut, in Wethersfield in my life. And I don't even know if I barely saw her. I think I saw her one time at Central Connecticut State University, something between her and a bunch of people at Central Connecticut State University. I don't know where she went to grammar school. Probably the same one I did. I never saw her there. Never even heard of her name in grammar school. A Mark Violet is one of the KKK black-themed confessions. And these are Latino-themed, Italian-themed, Irish-themed. There's an O'Brien family involved with a Mark Violet and a Justin Klavinskis. Involved also with people with the name Cololo. Involved with also people with the name Fred Grisey and a Rick Cianfaglione, who recorded Fred Grisey by himself sought me out to make confessions when he was a kid. I don't know all the people's names. on how he knew where I lived. Increasingly, he has roles with people with Modern Pastry and Mazzucato Bakery, involved with retired police chiefs, with some sexual and medical offenders of kids on my street, in a whole bunch of different countries, and overt criminal enterprises and private ones planting the same sequence shifts at the same time. These are increasingly people who are involved with the World Trade Center and the names next to it, including names at the court next to it, and both sides of a case there. These are names on both sides of cases in courts attached to fake and changed communications by others. While the others too have been used remotely, relative to how everyone could still be speaking about pastors' emotions as psychopaths with calm language or with aggression. See, we use aggression. Emotions are about the simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. You guys ask questions at the interbranch locations. You guys can't afford the answers proper. You can't afford what was actually the value. You know, all natures of investigators are being and haven't been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically, delusions raw. So it becomes the way they pretend and get away with other is changing and faking digital evidences, wire crime acts and methods, news recorded and confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have collusions. They already had collusions next to all natures of crime scenes, where everyone's speaking through others, forcing that. Including, then they pretend passionate emotions against people with crimes, like kids when they do things like that. Even when it comes down to murders, there are murders that they would have prevented. These are people that are tied next to the campuses, intercities too, with the ones next to the campuses increasingly tied to murders and untimely deaths, where they were timed use /s of that. And at the intercities, they use confessions. See, the breaching, their confessions are manifest and tells are manifest, where how the breaching method used confessions and tells at all locations, areas, and states at countries A through Z. And then modern countries were born with the breaching method still entrenched, roles with it still entrenched. Otherwise, that body was sentenced. Everything that caused and keeps blamed on other things other themselves, even when correctly, exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs, leaving itself out. A breaching method is a scientific value, replaced not just from James Madison's communications and our founders' communications, but replaced right from nature's communications with us. Nature shows us that there's an identity that all bodies share, including the body of the fish. They have quality aspects in nature that are distinct from ourselves, but like two eyes, but also is distinct from ourselves, but also non-distinct. And simultaneously, but also further a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. So further, I'm referring to it as hyper-simultaneous. This is what we could observe. And plus, if people debate the relativity of this, the debate contains quality aspects, nature, and demonstration / S of the same. That's why it's so important to observe where and how it is manifest that interbranch switch names and forged names, and have pretended not to realize that they had predicate acts with facts, needs, styles, organized crimes with federal evidences, racketeering worse than war crimes, roles. Even, and while tactically delusions raw too. So they've been preventing writing so they could stick fake writing into databases. There are people with the name Leahy at Harvard Hospital who put me in fake conversations with themselves. And then they have people with the name Lombardo. The people named Leahy are increasingly, since I was a kid, people tied to a Leahy family, and ones with the name Lombardo that I never saw on my street. They have roles with people on my street who have predicate acts with the police. Departments, plural. One's named Cololo and DeMoro. And these are also DeMoro confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed. These are people with the co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, their family members and neighbors, increasingly involved with federal evidences, crimes of Wethersfield police, identity theft, fraud, slanders with them. They pretended conversations with me as a kid and then as an adult. And they have these black KKK, Confederate flag, Latino theme. There's some black KKK involved with like there are people with a Victorian house on Two Route Highway, and the neighbors of them have people with the name are recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed, involved with people with the name Cololo, but also Phil Cololo has roles with them, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and probate court judges, family members, like the neighbors of them, and that's before they moved. These are also people with the police departments. There's a Chris White who tried they influenced put fake ties to me, and him and Eric Jensen and Ray Reynolds. Increasingly, Ray Reynolds is involved with people from my kindergarten class. I went to the school for 1 year. It's involved with people with the name Harris too, with the prosecutors and judges and their family members involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Preventing writing since I was a kid so they could stack more predicate acts with facts and databases. No S, collusion / S with a bunch of natures of organized crimes at once. So they got real audacity and delusions that we could observe when they speak about, law, or rather order too. So the order of the finite, the difference between the order of the finite or the finite, FINITE. See, in other words, or the order of what is active, grouped, or the order of, progressive reality. You got, in other words, so we have to have a re-education of America and have modern countries A through Z. Because nature, here, Anthony, natural law is real. Who denies it will have inherent to, active to, and progressive to. Their logic demonstration of the same thing, / S. Just like who denies that there is a torture / extortion / slavery method upon the suburbs, let alone upon the people of New York City, people in the background of the rap videos that we can't even see, but we could see that design tactically denatured. Not even trying to grow a plant from the walls of the buildings, just stack the people on there. Not, haven't even addressed how the suburbs that before our founders were born, they wanted to and could have built way better, safer. A little bit too just too narrow the room, a little bit unsafe. Identity of grounds, identity relationship to itself, and like water. Oh, but we had to have industry. We had to move fast and have the water for the mobility. Still, you could put the fresh water. You can save and make more energy lifting and dropping water in beautiful ways than it takes to lift it. If you pay attention to them, we get means come out of nowhere. Little kids, clearer than day. We know that the suburbs, you guys have replaced. You guys, let's attend to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, because names at and the witch trials placed there, because names next to those locations are increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and with names at next to the state judicial and corrections offices and their conjunctions, like the roads and routes that go by them. But like their family members too, right on Facebook with the FBI, involved with predicate acts with facts, wire crime acts and methods with the FBI too, and with Wethersfield Police, identity theft, fraud, slanders. They pretended to through the news too that I spoke with them as a kid and then as an adult. It wasn't at all. The kids who did go down to the police station, I didn't speak to them out of the police station or other. The kids who did go down to the police station, they put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me with a Chris Walters. Increasingly, he has roles with intelligence families, with the schools, private and public schools, with the security from off those locations, and with judges and prosecutors from off those locations, having collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, medical and sexual offenders of kids, including women and judges. There are black, white, female judges involved with some black KKK, Latino theme, Confederate flag theme, and digital crimes with them, with the principal upskirt nature. And I want more because there are more names involved. And he made all kinds of confessions They've been faking and changing what's recorded at campuses. They've been calling attacks on themselves, even so they could change and fake what's recorded when they're called out on it. Increasingly, people named Scalora are also involved with more sexual and medical offenders of kids, and they have roles of identity thefts that already relied upon them. Where investigators were already used criminally foreign influence, so they can't afford to have that discern now. These are also people next to the campuses, intercities connected. More people with the Institute of Living on the campus of Hartford Hospital are increasingly involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids with foreign and domestic countries, Russians, Ukraine, too. They're doctors involved with them, criminally foreign influence, the lawyers of the hospitals, all kind of wire milk. I can't even get a response. They won't respond to me. They have to keep putting, in other words, I can't get a response. For years, I've been begging on Facebook. They have the Facebook page of the Fox Connecticut News, WFSB, and WTNH involved with all kinds of predicate acts against me. They won't fix the fake news. They want to change and fake what people say outside of courts, where we could force the quality of fact, cheap nature, proper Black pupils, and online especially. They've been changing and faking what's recorded. We're going to examine their use of words like radical, make things appear to be debatable that are not. Even when they use truths that are not debatable, that are truths, they're using them for lies to screen collusion /S with all kinds of natures of sick things. And like they're people with, in other words, and all kinds of natures of name switching and forging, where and how the fact, cheap nature, quality aspects of nature are maintained, criminal insidiousness nature / hypercriminal insidiousness nature. I'm not even a lawyer, thank God. The bar itself is criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. They've been trying to pretend not to realize that offensively with politicians and with the police forums and intelligence, other foreign and domestic, next to Fox Connecticut News, and the ones at them with their stories. Please do what's right, Fox Connecticut News. Fix the baked conversations with me at WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, pretended with you guys at Fox 61 News, Channel 61 News. And with also the intelligence next to you guys are the ones connected. Also, these are other ways involved, planting evidences with the sources of WTNH at corners of streets and from the founding locations in all Wethersfield, all along from there, all along Route 175, in conjunctions to it, like corners on it, are people who planted fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and acting so other people could take pictures is recorded. And demonstrably, more than plausibly recorded, involved.